I'm a guard stationed at a secret government prison. Part 7, written by Mr. Outlaw. Now even I'm confused, Adrian said before turning to Sandu. What's going on here? Who are you? Yeah, that's a good question, I added, also looking in Sandu's direction. Come on, man, tell us. Now, I've known this guy for years, yet I couldn't begin to understand what he was planning here. Sandu took a while to respond, and even then, it was less than satisfying. It's complicated, he said when he finally spoke. By the way, aren't you guys missing the show? I wasn't going to force the guy to talk. Over the years, I've learned that doing so only leads to disingenuous answers. Besides, he was right. Jack was already rushing towards Wu.
Come on, Wu. Show me your kung fu. I'll beat you down with good old American boxing.
Jack screamed. Ha! He really thinks Americans invented boxing? Adrian muttered. Instead, Wu opted to blast him back with his hand shotgun. Jack was sent flying into a support beam, demolishing it in the process. While he had taken no ostensible damage, there were now holes littered across the American flag printed on his chest plate. That sure got him pretty rattled.
Oh, buddy,
he said, a deranged smirk drawn across his face. For the first time ever, Wu decided to speak.
What did you think was going to happen?
He said. In an instant, they charged each other. Given their respective power and speed, their combined movements were hardly comprehensible. But if I had to approximate the exchange, it went something like this. Jack lands across to Wu's helmet, cracking it slightly. Wu attempts to stab Jack with a large blade. It breaks on Jack's arm. Jack presses forward, throwing a flurry of jabs at Wu's head. Most of them are blocked. Wu counters with a kick to the ribs. It hurts Jack. Wu uses his railgun eyes to burn the side of Jack's cheek. And then the gauntlet is unleashed. Wu lands a brutal combination with steel-studded knuckles. Wu shoves a grenade into Jack's face. Wu pounds away at Jack's ribs with a spiked bat. Wu stabs Jack through the shoulder with an elbow blade. Wu snaps one of Jack's fingers off. Wu headbutts him. Wu picks him up and executes a hard takedown, destroying the walkway that they're standing on and causing them both to fall to a lower floor. And then, Wu begins strangling Jack. He's got the advantage of his weapons, I said. There's no way that Jack's turning it around. Adrian scoffed. The US didn't funnel billions into this guy for nothing. He's got a few tricks up his sleeve. And oh boy, did he ever.
Ah!
Jack screamed. He was frenetic as he struggled to break out of Wu's iron grasp. He cursed and screamed before his right arm began glowing red. He let go of Wu's wrist, ramming his knuckles right into his throat instead. It was the first significant strike. I could see Wu's armor splinter as he was launched backwards, forced to release his grip. Still exasperated from the struggle, Jack pulled himself up, his fist smoldering like hell. At the same time, Wu was gasping for air himself.
How's that?
He said, holding his fist up while grinning like a man utterly unhinged. Suddenly, his left fist began to glow also, the only difference being that it was blue.
This is about to get gnarly,
Jack said.
The stars and stripes style is immeasurable.
What followed was an exchange of blurs. I could hear explosive bouts of clanking metal. White smoke and flickering sparks intercut with flashes of red and blue from Jack's fists. Two individuals at the pinnacle of their power striking each other with everything that they had. After around an entire minute of hectic but incomprehensible fighting, both men had sustained significant damage. Wu's suit was covered in cracks and dents, and his right forearm and left thigh were now exposed. There was also blood leaking through his fractured helmet. On the other hand, hardly an inch of Jack's body was unscathed. He was cut and swollen all over. One of his eyes had been stabbed out, and his right shoulder had been grated down to the bone. They stared each other down during their first few seconds of fleeting recuperation, and then they were right back at each other's throats. Wu attempted to blast Jack in the face with a palm cannon, but the American managed to weave underneath the shot, throwing both fists into Wu's chest, causing his armor to shatter completely at that particular spot. His vitals were now exposed. Jack knew what kind of opportunity that he had just created. It was indicated by the wicked grin on his face. In a matter of milliseconds, Jack pulled back one of his fists and struck Wu directly. Without his armor protecting him, that blow must have liquefied his insides. In any case, that's what I got from his reaction. In an instant, he collapsed in pain before being tossed over the rails and onto an even lower floor. As he clutched his sides in excruciation on the ground, Jack leapt down and stomped on his helmet, finally shattering that as well. Jack had accomplished something that even the most sophisticated of weaponry would have had trouble doing. In a desperate move, Wu pulled out his shotgun and began spraying it upwards, forcing Jack to retreat. Feeling pain that must have eclipsed the boundaries of unbearable, he pulled himself up, finally revealing his cut-to-hell visage through the broken helmet.
Ha! You're just a regular person underneath that suit, hey?
Jack said, panting.
How comical. You were too, before the experiment.
Wu responded. Jack scoffed.
Is that what you think? That I'm just like you? A regular guy? Yes,
Wu responded.
We weren't born special.
Jack shook his head.
And why does that matter? Look, I'll give you one thing. You're strong. You even gave me a bit of a hard time. But your attitude is BS.
Wu had trouble responding to that.
Sure, we weren't born special,
Jack continued.
But we've changed ourselves. We've clawed our way to the top.
Jack paused for a moment.
No, you're not just a regular guy underneath that suit after all. And I wasn't just another guy in the crowd before the experiment. They just don't choose random assholes, you know? These are things that we've accomplished ourselves. Things that nobody else could do. Why don't you understand that?
Another pause followed. The silence was broken when Wu reached over his shoulder, pulling out a terribly large red-orange sword. The Singularity Blade.
Jack Barnes,
Wu began.
You seem unintelligent on the surface, but you've almost said something profound just now.
Jack smirked at that pseudo-compliment.
You are strong as well,
Wu continued.
I'll show you my respect by cutting you down with my ultimate weapon. Ha, I'm touched,
Jack responded.
I guess I'll have to show you the same courtesy.
He closed his eyes for a moment before opening them back up, revealing nothing but white underneath his lids. The red and blue radiating off his fist began to extend up his forearms, before quickly enveloping each side of his body entirely.
You should be honored. I'm about to crush you with the full force of my American spirit.
The two tremendously strong men, both now at the pinnacle of their own power, stood across from each other in full acknowledgement of each other's powers. An earth-shaking clash was about to ensue. Wu went first, swinging the blade and releasing an obscure serpentine entity from its tip. The entity rushed forward with unimaginable speed. It latched its claws into Jack's arms and attempted to bite his head off. Jack responded by drilling his fist down on the creature's throat. It bit down, puncturing his arm but shattering its own teeth in the process. Jack and the creature fought brutally and relentlessly, with the latter seemingly growing in size as the battle endured. However, Wu himself was standing still. "What's he doing? Why isn't he going after him?" I thought out loud. "He can't," Adrian responded. "Look at him closely." It took me a second, but I understood. The punch that Wu had taken to his chest had essentially put him out of commission. In fact, at that moment, he was struggling to even stand up. Wu was relying on the singularity creature to get the job done. After some minutes, the beast had grown to an ungodly size. It resembled some kind of colossal, ghoul-like dragon. It bit down on Jack's arm once again, taking it clean off this time. Jack shrieked in endurance-filled pain. He headbutted one of the dragon's eyes out in response. The beast roared in pain as it whirled backwards, utterly annihilating its surroundings. It even took out a few of the cameras. Jack took the opportunity to reel in the frenetic beast, jumping up on its head and bashing away. Despite having half of its face caved in, the dragon still managed to fling him into a wall, ramming what remained of its head into his torso moments later. A wave of blood burst from Jack's mouth before his lips curled back into a sadistic, unrelenting grin. He punched the creature's remaining eyes out before getting on top of it and rendering the rest of its head into a ghostly mush with nothing but his fists. Just like that, the battle was over. As the dragon died, the blade shattered with it. Jack leapt down and stood back in front of Wu. He half chuckled and half groaned as he limped towards him.
Lost an eye, lost an arm. You really put me through the gauntlet, hey?
Wu's expression was stone for a while, but it eventually turned into a grin. There was no malice behind it. He was simply acknowledging the interminable fighting spirit that Jack had put on display.
Well, it looks like my fate's been sealed,
Wu said. Jack reciprocated the grin, breathing heavy through his teeth.
I gotta say, you weren't a pushover. But in the end, America always wins.
Jack finished Wu off with a quick strike to the head. As the mechanical menace dropped, Jack's body stopped glowing and he began to stagger away. His movements were strained and delirious. In any case, he didn't make it too far. He dropped about 10 paces from Wu. That was fun, Jack muttered, slowly drifting off into the darkness. Even in death, his grin didn't waver. Man, did they both have to die? Well, let's see if one of these other weirdos can make it out alive, Adrian said. I had been so invested that I had nearly forgotten about the other fights that were going on. I turned my head to see Kente effortlessly strangling Senju.
I killed your master with 3 strikes, and you are even weaker than him. Your effort is an insult.
I'm going to kill.
Senju tried to hiss. Kente struck the side of Senju's jaw and slammed his neck into the ground, interrupting the sentence. I guess we'll never know what he was about to say. That's a real mystery there. But despite the overwhelming power gap, Senju kept rushing back at him, only to abruptly get beat down every single time. Senju cursed in frustration after taking another punch to the chest.
Stop evading justice. Your time is done.
But then, an unexpected figure arrived on the scene. Hugo rushed into the frame, directing his own rush of blows at Kente. However, he reacted to them the same way a regular man would have reacted to a mosquito bite. Hugo was subsequently knocked back without much apparent effort on Kente's part. His scars were glowing as he pulled himself back up, his eyes pursued with a piercing fury. Why is he so pissed off? I thought to myself. Kale arrived moments later, yelling after Hugo.
What are you doing? I know you're crazy, but what?
Kale shouted.
He is the one who killed my mentor,
Hugo said, his voice shaking.
the last good man on this earth, destroyed by the same evils he attempted to help. But he was foolish. There can be only one response to the sin in this world.
Hugo screeched.
This asshole killed my master as well,
Senju said, turning to Hugo.
Let's bury him.
Hugo sighed, clearly not excited at his prospective ally.
Man,
Kale said, staring up at Kente.
This isn't fun anymore.
All three of them tried attacking at once. No luck. Kente tanked each blow before striking each one of them down in rapid succession. He grabbed KL by the neck before tossing him at Senju, sending them both crashing into a wall. KL swore as he struggled to pull himself up.
Yo, priest, what level of detachment are you at?
Hugo exhaled.
99%.
Hugo muttered, looking up at the steadily but menacingly approaching Kente.
So we're screwed.
Not necessarily. I'm about 10 times stronger at 100% than I am at 99.
I'm not sure that the math checks out,
Hugo said before taking another strike on the stomach.
It's no matter, Hugo said. One of the biggest evils stands before us. Every measure must be taken.
You're gonna die,
KL uttered, being kept on his toes by repeated blows from Kente. Hugo's eyes flickered a deep red, almost like a literal fire was behind them.
We are going to die regardless.
Kente turned away from KL and turned to Hugo. He squinted.
Now I remember you.
Hugo threw a cross so hard that it seemed to split the air molecules in its path. Despite managing to block it, Kente was blasted backwards. Skidding to a stop, he held his arm up, which had been badly mangled from the blow. He sneered at Hugo, his eyes growing crazier with every second that passed.
Evil must be eliminated.
You are in no position to make that call,
Hugo responded. They each bolted at each other. The two traded blows, with Hugo slowly but surely overwhelming Kente. KL could only watch in awe. Senju, on the other hand,
Yeah, kick his ass,
he screamed. But the more damage that Kente took, the more wild he seemed to get. Hugo landed a 1-2 to his jaw and temple, drawing blood from his head before finishing the combination by drilling a knee into his liver. This nearly caused Kinte to buckle on the spot.
Why did you kill him?
Hugo spat at Kinte in between strikes.
He was the last chance at salvation this disgusting world had.
Now bruised, bloody, and battered, Kinte dropped to one knee. Hugo stepped in for the finishing blow, or what I thought was going to be the finishing blow. Kinte managed to catch the strike, surprising just about everyone watching. His forehead veins bulged as he looked up at Hugo. His face was twisted in an inconceivable expression of demented wrath.
I killed him because he stood in the way of justice.
In a split second, Hugo was knocked backwards, having his chest completely caved in.
What?
He wheezed out as he bent over, trying to funnel his air into his lungs.
He's stronger. Be careful.
Kinte picked him up and judo slammed him over the rails before he could get the sentence out completely. I have never cringed as hard as I did while watching his spine get instantaneously bent into the worst possible shape.
Hugo!
Kale yelled, charging at Kinte. A valiant but fruitless effort. He was picked up and brutally ragdolled into the walls and then the floors. Kinte finished the ruthless display by slamming him back into the wall. Kale crumpled like a pancake, with every bone in his body just about broken. Recovering from that was going to be a tall order. Kale whispered a curse, unable to make another move. Suddenly, Sinju was back on his own, heavily injured and looking far less confident than he was before. "We can't let him win," Sendu said. "Oh, you're not watching the kid anymore. What a surprise," Adrian said. I shook my head. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Instead of answering my question, he just brushed past me before abruptly sprinting out the door. "What the heck, man?" I called after him. It was no use. He was already gone. I fumbled around in the place for a moment. On the one hand, I really didn't want to go out there. But on the other, he was my friend. And as much as I wanted answers, I also wanted to make sure that he didn't do something he wasn't going to have a chance to regret. After a few moments of frenetic contemplation, I found myself chasing after him. "What are you guys gonna do?" I heard Adrian call from behind me. At that point, he was the least of my concerns. Chills ran down my spine as I traversed across the blood-stained halls decorated by the mangled corpses of my fellow guards. It was a sight that I had experienced in my nightmares before. I'm sure just about every guard had. But seeing it in real life was jarring, to say the least. It sure had been one hell of a day. But the inevitable dusk was finally closing in.